Hey there, friend! Welcome back to the Closing Chapters podcast, where every mission has a story. When I say she did her due diligence and did everything on the honey-do list, I mean it. I went in, and when we originally had our consultation to list the property, she was already in the process of repainting all of the trim in her home. A+, my friends. Hey friends, welcome back. As realtors, there are a lot of times where we can see the potential in a property. And every once in a while it sneaks up on us and we go, oh my goodness, if I could just snag this property, I would take it in a skinny minute. Now, this next property that I got the opportunity to sell was absolutely one of those gems. And on top of that, it was really surprising that it took so long for it to sell. So let me tell you about it. I had the opportunity to list this adorable condo in historic downtown Sumter, South Carolina. And it was in walking distance of a lot of great areas. All of the historic homes were right around the corner from it. There was a beautiful one straight across the street from it, actually. And this set of condos had single levels and two-story levels, like townhomes. So this was a single level, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 2 separate living spaces condo. It would be a phenomenal spot for 2 people that were rooming together or like short-term situations. Like, it would have been awesome. So this owner, when I say she did her due diligence and did everything on the honey-do list, I mean it. I went in, and when we originally had our consultation to list the property, she was already in the process of repainting all of the trim in her home. A+, my friends. That is one of the best things that you can do when you are preparing for listing your property, is to freshen up the trim, because it's one of the things that gets beat up no matter what you do when you're living in a property, and it's noticed and seen. And then a lot of times buyers equate that to deferred maintenance, which could probably be furthest from the truth, but that's the connection that I've seen time and time again. So she did all the right things. She was prepping it, she was touching up the paint, she had decluttered and packed most of her stuff, and we had a great clean slate to work with. So why did it take so long for it to sell? In that time, one, it was normal for properties to be on the market for upwards of 6 months. Now, this particular property, we listed it in July of 2018, and it sold in the beginning of May 2019. So it took almost a year. So we're talking 9-10 months for it to get under contract. 9 months, basically. It was one of those situations where you're like, why doesn't somebody else see the potential that I see? If I could buy this property today, I would. It would be such a phenomenal investment. And on top of that, how often do we have people looking for bedrooms on the first floor? And this is a 1-story unit. Now, there's a couple of things going on. In my market, we are mainly a military market with a lot of people moving in and out with military. Not that often did people want to be in the historic district in Sumter. They wanted to be in the neighborhoods in a single family home with a yard. That was one of the great things about people when they came to Sumter, is that they knew that they were going to have a yard. I guess there's a lot of other areas where having a decent yard is not something that you can account for. So that was one of the driving forces that people loved when they were coming to our area. Now, there was a little patio yard in this area and a big field behind, but that doesn't make for a complete fenced-in space for you. Also, if you were in the military lifestyle and you live on base, there's a lot of times where you're sharing walls. So a lot of times if people were going to purchase something, they did not want to be sharing walls. They truly wanted a single family home that was not connected, where they could hear their neighbors' conversations. So those 2 factors were definitely playing against us. And there was another condo in the same strip that was for sale at the same time. It also wasn't moving. And it was also priced more, and it was not as up to date as mine. So that let me know that we were okay, right? Like, this one wasn't moving either. And if it was moving with some things that going against it compared to mine, then we would have had to reconfigure, like figure out what was going on. Now, the third thing that was going against it is, I told you, it was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath property, which is really cool. There was good sized rooms, walk-in closets with both bedrooms, but it's only 2 bedrooms. And there was a separate living space on the back side of one of the bedrooms. So could you have converted that into a 3rd room? Maybe, sure. But it wasn't traditionally set up where it could comfortably be 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. And very often that is like the standard. That is what most people are looking for when they are purchasing, is a minimum of 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. So it took a little bit. We had to find the right person. And the right person did come along, and that right person happened to be an older gentleman that was just him, and it was a great space. He could pull up and park right in front of his condo. Everything was on a single floor, and it all worked out just fine after we got the ball rolling. So it's just a great example that sometimes it takes a little while. And in the meantime, my sweet seller had packed up, moved to Georgia, got married, and was completely ready to start like her next chapter. So she was so kind and patient and understanding throughout this process. And I'm very thankful that she got the fact that there were some different things that were not as common for this area. For her, when she bought the condo, she was a single lady, and it was perfection for her. She had access to downtown Sumter. She could walk her dog all the time, and it was perfect. But as the saying goes, sometimes love and the military have different plans. She would have never planned to move from there. She really loved her spot and had customized it to her own. But life took her to Georgia. And I don't think she would have it any other way, honestly. She was so happy, and it's so sweet to see people that find their person and will do anything and everything to make sure that relationship comes first. So that is to be applauded. But that just goes to show that sometimes we have to be patient and we have to wait for the right scenario to come together. And I want to remind you that once again, just like in 2018-19, we are back in that world. We're back into what we would call a normal market, like where everything's even keel. It's not heavy one way or the other, right? We have a good amount of listings, which is great because then buyers can actually shop. They have options, but that also means that buyers can negotiate a little bit, and sellers don't have the stronghold of just saying take it or leave it. So to me, as a professional in this market, that's a nice place to be, because that means that we actually get to do our job. We get to negotiate. We get to make a happy meet in the middle and have a conversation with both sides. And that's pretty cool. Now, personally, on the hardship side of it, my sellers, any listings currently, it's tough. It's tough because a lot of them, if they're listed right now, probably have somewhere they need to go and they need to be out from underneath their property. And it is taking time for the right person to come along, which is not necessarily problematic. The part that is problematic is a lot of these people purchased these properties in 2022 or 2023, and they bought at the heat of the market. So they bought high and at high interest rates. And it's very difficult, especially as a VA buyer, to get out from underneath of that selling 2 to 3 years later. There's a good chance they have little to no equity built up into the property, and they simply cannot float that payment and another payment because they were stretched thin when they bought it to begin with. Now, I know you could say that was their choice, but you know what? Sometimes it's not always their choices. They buy with good intentions. They think they're going to be there for a while. Things happen and change, and we have to shift, right? So all that to say, if you are a current buyer in the market, you're going to have to be understanding that a lot of times these sellers have little to no wiggle room right now. And that doesn't mean that we can't all negotiate together, but it also means that you have to be reasonable, right? And if you have a professional on your side, then they should be doing their due diligence. They're going to look and see when the property was purchased and verify if it was purchased with a VA or an FHA or conventional. What's the difference? Why does it matter, Brittney? FHA and conventional, there's at least a 3% down payment on it. So that means they've at least eaten into a little bit of their equity. On VA, more than likely, they did not have to put a down payment, and they probably rolled in their funding fee, which could be 2+% of the sales price that was added into their mortgage. So there's a good chance they haven't even paid off that funding fee, nonetheless started eating into the principal balance of their loan if they've only been there 2 to 3 years. You need to be educated. on both sides of the fence, because I think sometimes as buyers, you go, this house has been sitting on the market and they should want to negotiate and they should want to do this and they should give me this and they should give me that. That's all fine and dandy if it's possible, even, period. End of discussion. It may not even be realistic or possible. And also, this is your property that you are buying, that you want. The seller doesn't have to give up everything. There's definitely an even meet in the middle, right? So keep that in mind and negotiate wisely, and don't let a good property pass you by simply because you couldn't negotiate and waggle them down to exactly where you wanted them. Rates are a little bit more reasonable now than they were back in 2022 and 2023. They're anticipated to hopefully continue to go on a downward trend. So you are already one step ahead of that person that is probably selling. So just food for thought. Anyhow, that is my TED Talk on current market affairs. But back to this beautiful condo. Like I said, we accomplished the goal. It took a little while, and not every seller is as patient as mine was. So sometimes they get really up in arms and they want to blame. And you can't play the blame game, my friends, especially if your professional is telling you from the beginning what we are up against. And we had a very clear conversation, and we were priced very appropriately for that conversation. So we had this listed at $114,900. So it was really good, and it was like a 1,600 square foot condo. It was a good size property, and like I said, the location was pretty darn cool. But all that to say, we also knew that we had a couple things against us, and we had to make sure that we counterbalance that. The other piece is that this is unique in the fact that there's not a whole bunch of condos that sell every day in the Sumter market. So finding comparable properties was not that easy at that time. So we also had to be very aware and be wise about where we were at pricing wise, because you don't sell a house once. You sell it twice. You sell it to the buyer, and then you sell it to the appraiser. And you have to justify to both of them the value, right? So we have to make sure that we are reasonable and we can back ourselves up whenever we're doing our pricing strategies. But anywho, we were successful, and my seller lived a great life, moving to Georgia with her honey. But if you ever have a property that you think is unique or going to be hard to sell, remember that every property has a buyer. There is a price, there is a time, there is a place for any and all properties to be sold. You just have to be willing to listen and negotiate and be where you need to be. So give me a call if you ever feel like you're in that position, and let's talk about it. Let's talk about your property, what makes it unique, why do we think that it is going to have a hardship, and how do we combat that? How do we find the light at the end of the tunnel? How do we show the beauty in these properties, right? And that might just be showing it off to investors, or it might just be showing off how it can be styled, or the benefits of having a large yard, even if it's only 1.5 bathrooms. All of these things, right? There's ways to be creative and make sure that we are highlighting the pluses about the house and not focusing on like the one little detail that might bring it down. As always, remember, be creative, my friends, and you've got this. Every property has a buyer. I hope you guys have a great day, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Hey, I just wanted to say thank you for being here and listening in on this episode of Closing Chapters with me. I truly enjoy putting this content together, and I hope that you enjoy it too. If so, could you like, subscribe, and share this episode with somebody you know that will enjoy it just as much as you did? Thank you so much.